Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again. Today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we are taking a look at the best weeks of December for your Spotlight caches. There are quite a lot of desirable cards coming back to the Spotlights in December, as well as some new ones coming out. So we are going to be going over the ones that I think are worth it. Now, there's a little visual bug here. Stegron is not a 4-7. Little bit of a visual bug there on Snap Fan's end. He's a 4-6 from the recent buff, but this will be coming out on Monday, so final day to get access to this week if you want it. Man-Thing, Jeff, Stegron. Overall, I think this week is going to be one that is probably mainly desirable to you if you are missing Jeff. Jeff is far and away the best card here. Man-Thing, also a solid card in his own right, even though he's not seeing a crazy amount of play. He did get kind of better with Luke Cage getting nerfed and being less popular, so he's got that going for him. Stegron, still not finding a super big home anywhere. Some people trying him in Move, but just kind of still a pretty meh card. But we have Jeff, and Jeff is one of the best 2-drops in the game, so if for some reason you haven't had the chance to get Jeff, I think this is a fairly appealing week, especially if you're missing one or two of the other cards, as even though they're not crazy meta breakers or anything, they're definitely playable cards that can be fun to mess around with. But Jeff is really the all-star here. If you don't have him, this is probably a more enticing week. If you do, it's probably a week you want to pass on. Then we have the Blob week coming up on Tuesday, working on some Blob decks for that one. I think Blob is a okay card. He definitely suffers a lot from the change to American Chavez. Chavez was kind of the perfect Blob card, because it would always, if you ramped out Blob, you would always get the stats from Chavez, and Chavez would also give you that consistency to help get your Blob out early more often. Without Chavez, I do think this card definitely loses some value. The number one comment I see about Blob is, hey, Darkhawk's really meta, which is true, it is. Blob deletes your deck, you know, that kind of counters the Darkhawk stuff, and while that might be relevant, I think it's going to be a little bit overrated how often you're going to be playing Blob on the final turn to delete your deck. And well, yes, it does get rid of the Darkhawk. These Darkhawk decks often aren't only relying on Darkhawk for their power. A lot of them are relying on the Werewolf by Night stuff too, and they can still get a lot of power in other lanes between that and their early game cards, which are just kind of efficient. So I'm not the hugest Blob fan personally, even though I like the design of the card. Maybe in a ramp deck could be kind of neat. You get him out, you copy him, but then at that point it's like, aren't we kind of doing a similar Electro ramp into Panther and then Zola? It's kind of a similar situation, though you do get that Darkhawk benefit. The other cards, though, I think are actually the reason you might want to go for that week, and that is the buffed Ravonna and Living Tribunal. So buffed Ravonna has been really impressive. I actually think the buff to this card was massive in making it just feel like a more reasonable card to play, both in Darkhawk shells, negative shells, some Iron Man type stuff. The card is just like a real card now, whereas before it just didn't really feel like it was. Even at 2-1, it just wasn't really doing enough for the body to justify the cost of putting in your deck, and now it does. Now it's just a premium stats with a powerful effect. Living Tribunal is another really great one, because even though, again, this isn't, you know, the most meta-defining card, it does open up quite a few different deck-building possibilities if you like playing these types of decks. The main two ones being a all-in ongoing deck, or the Hella Tribunal stuff. I don't know which of those is better right now. Hella Tribunal kind of has more high roll, because you can go the Living Tribunal route, where you get the Iron Man and the Onslaught into Tribunal, but you can also just try and hide behind Invisible Woman, get the MODOK into Hela, so there are multiple ways of winning. The ongoing deck doesn't really have that same kind of divergence, where you have two like very effective ways, but I think a lot of people have been doing it where they have like a Spectrum backup plan, and maybe that's good enough since the deck has gotten a powerful new addition in something like Miss Marvel. But yeah, Living Tribunal decks, you can't play a Tribunal deck without the Tribunal, so if those decks have ever interested you at all, this is probably a much more enticing week. If you're missing all 3 of these cards, I think it is a very good week because I think they all encourage a different kind of deck. So if your goal is to just get, the most amount of new stuff to mess around and play with as possible, this is probably a very, very good week if you're missing 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 of these cards. Then we have Havoc week with Nico and Legion. So Havoc is a weird card. The number one play everyone always is talking about with Havoc is, oh, I can send Havoc over to my opponent, and then they won't be able to get energy for the rest of the game with something like Viper. Obviously, the Havoc will grow. Havoc does get +4 every turn, so maybe there's some application here by playing Havoc on the 5th turn or the final turn. If you can get some cost reduction stuff, obviously there's some synergy there with Ravona. You could get it down for 1 cost on the final turn of the game and then get a 1/4, which is pretty value. Or if you're playing a deck that doesn't use all of its mana, like Negative or something, maybe you get some extra value out of it. But I think this is going to be a very fringe card. It is the only Series 4 card of the month, so if you have the other cards here and are interested in Havoc, tokens are the way to go if you have them for 3k. I don't think Havoc is going to make that many waves, though. I'm not expecting a whole lot from this card, and unless someone cooks up something really, really spicy that looks good, I just don't think I'm going to pick that one up. The other 2 cards are pretty good ones to grab, though. Nico is by far the all-star of the week. You missed out on Nico last time. Nico is a really, really good pickup now. She's a very relevant card across multiple decks. Main ones being things like all the different bound shells and destroy, even Thanos. Just a ton of decks like playing Nico. She's very flexible, she's very fun, and I think she kind of makes this a worthwhile week on her own if you're missing her. And then Legion. Legion's a weird one because he was very meta-defining for a while, but as things have changed and time has passed, Legion has kind of been getting cut from lists. I think one of the reasons is, decks have more powerful 5-drops to consider, and Legion's power was really kind of dependent on getting a good location that synergized with him well. And that's not going to happen every game. So now that we have something like Annihilus, which can help justify playing another powerful card in the deck like Sentry, that is kind of the way people seem to be going for their 5-drops. And even though Legion's good, he's not particularly seeing the most play right now. Still not a bad card to grab if you don't have him, but he's not what I would be opening this week for specifically. So yeah, Nico's the all-star here. If you're missing Nico, I could see going for this week. However, if you have Nico, I think this is probably a pass, given that the other 2 are Series 4 cards who aren't particularly having a huge impact. And then the final week, this is the big week, in my opinion. This is the one I'm saving for. This is the one I think a lot of people are saving for, because all Series 5 cards, and in my opinion, all cards that are kind of relevant and pretty strong. So Selene has a ton of potential. Obviously, this will be after the next OTA. We have an OTA coming on the 22nd, so some things could change before this card releases. I'm not expecting anything too crazy to change, but Selene has some really powerful synergy in the Annihilus decks, being able to get Selene down, make your Hood, your Goblin, your Black Widow. Like, there's so many cards that can be very powerful with Selene. I think one of the strongest ones we're going to see is on turn 3, playing Black Widow into Selene, where you will give your opponent a Widow's Bite and then reduce the power on it and put them in the same lane. Maybe you bounce them next turn with Beast, do it all over again. That has a lot of potential. Just seems like a generally powerful include in a Annihilus deck, or even maybe a deck running the Green and Hobgoblin. Also a Series 5 card, so definitely one you want to get from caches if you can. I think given that Annihilus decks have been doing fairly well recently, this is going to be a pretty desirable pickup and a solid upgrade to that style of deck. Iron Lad, this is a big one. Much like Tribunal, people have been waiting for Lad for a very long time. Pretty much since the first Spotlight weeks came out back in June, I think. So Iron Lad, this is another one of those cards that there's no real replacement for Iron Lad. No card kind of does what he does in enabling a bit more consistency or a bit more high roll, depending on how you decide to build your deck. And he's He's one of those cards that you don't need for every deck, but the decks that often include him, he gives a pretty substantial boost to. I think this card alone is going to be the one that makes a lot of people open this week. As people have wanted Lad for a while, it hasn't been easy to get him, and now it's nice to see him finally being added to spotlights. And then Black Knight. So Black Knight, while at his release was really not great with the recent buff to where the Ebony Blade can't be destroyed or have its power reduced, Black Knight feels like a very real card now. I've been toying around with a few different Black Knight lists. The card has really impressed me. I think if nothing else, it is still a lot of fun. But more than just being a fun card, it does feel like relatively competitive of a card. It turns out when your opponent can't interact with your really big 4-drop, it's pretty good. So I think if you are an enjoyer of discard, this is definitely a card for you. Might be alright in Hela. I've seen some people trying it there, but I've also just seen a lot of like kind of focused Black Knight decks or decks that take a package, whether that be like a Shuri package or a Lockdown package, and then merge it with a small discard package, including Black Knight, to pretty decent results. So this is the All-Star Week to me. This is the one I'm going to be going for above all else, as I think the things here are just the best things out of the bunch for December. So that is the wrap up for the December cards. I do like to show the cards coming the following month as well, as even though things can change here, whether that be with the new cards or adjusting the spotlights, even though those things can change, I find they don't change too often, and it's generally good to be aware of this stuff so that way you don't blow all your caches on a December week if there's something you want more in the following month. Not going to go super in depth on these, but I will say out of all the cards listed here, the ones I think are going to be the most exciting in terms of new releases are Kyera, which seems like it could be very powerful in protecting your 1 and 6 drops. The Season Pass card, Scar, seems like it has a whole ton of potential. I think that card could end up being really good. And players who don't have Silver Surfer yet can also get that a bit early from the pass. Looking at the spotlights, though, just kind of bringing back more cards that we have seen a bit more recently. Hitmonkey and High Evo in the first week, Galactus, Howard second week, Phoenix Force and Nihilus in the third week, and Elsa and Loki in the fourth week. I think out of all the cards returning, Nihilus and Phoenix Force are probably two of the most relevant, though High Evo week is probably very good if you do not have High Evo yet, as it kind of builds a deck on its own. Loki is kind of up in the air, as it's likely they're going to nerf that card, so we don't know what happens to it. And most of the other cards that are returning here see more fringe play, like Galactus, Hitmonkey, Howard, and Elsa, so those aren't ones I'd be prioritizing. We do have Hercules, who's going to be kind of a card that might have some move synergy type stuff, you're bouncing around your move cards a bit more, Meek for some discard stuff, and Grandmaster for some on-reveal stuff. I don't think any of these cards are going to make a crazy impact, but they might be nice little boosts to the archetypes that they work in, so if you like those kind of decks, maybe you want to keep them in mind for what you'll be opening come January, but just wanted to show this so that way people can kind of plan around it a little bit more. And January is actually a 5-week season, so this one wasn't on the chart. We do have Beta Ray Bill, the Thor at Home 4/5. Puts another basically like Mjolnir in your deck, but it's a 0/1. Doubles Beta Ray Bill's power. Probably will make sense in, you know, the Thor Jane Lockjaw shenanigans or any Thor Jane deck. Seems like a fun card. I don't know if it's going to be that great, but I'm excited for it. Big one this week is Werewolf. Werewolf right now is a huge part of all these bounce decks. Gets them a whole ton of power. Who knows if it'll still be looking like it is right now by the time January 30th rolls around. But at least for right now, this is a card I think many people are going to want to get if they missed out on it the first time around. And Nebula. Nebula also one of the more powerful 1-drops in the game. There have been a few different opportunities to get her at this point between Spotlight Cash, the recent bundle, all that stuff. But if for some reason you don't have Nebula by this point, definitely a card worthwhile picking up. So I think this is actually a very, very good week if you're missing at least 2 of these cards. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for our December card overview. Let me know what you think of the cards in the comments below. Which weeks are you going for? And the links will be in the description if you want to check out any of this stuff for yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.